Is it fine just to call you James, or do you prefer Dr.
Jim,
James or
no, Jim is fine.
Jim? Okay, great.
Jim, yeah, Jim is fine. I have a string of letters after my name that I accumulated over the years, but that don't mean a whole lot.
Yeah, I have a little bio here, but it doesn't go
Yeah,
too much into your credentials as much as it just goes into your experiences.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have 7 university degrees, including a doctorate. So,
You've been busy.
well, those are just those are just degrees. I have a lot of other paperwork as well. So,
Yes,
just
actually,
been around for a long time.
Yep.
just give me 1 second. Give me a few minutes.
Matthew, I worked in the school system up until basically a year ago.
Oh, wow.
And a year ago, I mean, you may not know this about me, but I'm a 3-time cancer survivor.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I've had surgery three times and so on. But uh, a year ago, just over a year ago, I had
All right. Sorry, guys.
a hemorrhage, a brain hemorrhage.
Oh, my goodness.
Which sort of shut me down because I'm limited in my travel and everything now.
All right. We are going on live.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go.
All right. Let's do it. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It is really, I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm also loving this moment because this is the moment I'm waiting for a long time. First of all, I just want to quickly go through the agenda and then let you know what's going on, what's going to happen. First of all, I will go through a small, very brief introduction, intro about Voice of Men 360 and also IMD, International Men's Day, and also intro about my co-host. Of course, I thought it will be helping and then helping other people to have a co-host. So I will, I mean, he will also taking care of the rest of the show, and I will be monitoring, moderating, and also, you know, helping your questions and other things, house items, right? So let's start at people are joining, that's fine. It's already 10:34. First of all, I would like to thank all of you guys for taking your time and then joining me. It's a good morning in Canada, but any part of the world, it's a good afternoon and good evening, everybody. And it's a great pleasure to have you guys. This is our first webinar, and Thank you for watching, and then thank you for joining again. First of all, I just want to give you a brief intro about Voice of Men. Voice of Men is a not-for-profit organization. It is based in Canada, and also it is a part of International Men's Day. International Men's Day focuses on 6 pillars. Let me give you 6 pillars, what they are focusing actually. First one, to promote positive male role models, not just movie stars and sportsmen, but everyday working classmen who are living decent, honest lives. To celebrate men's positive contributions to society, community, family, marriage, childcare, and the environment. To focus on men's health and well-being, social, emotional, physical, and spiritual. Fourth one, to highlight discrimination against men in areas of social services, social attitudes and expectations, and law. Fifth one, to improve gender relations and promote gender equality. Sixth, to create a safer, better world where people can be saved and grow to reach their full potential. See, these are the 6 pillars they are working on, and so far 90 countries joined together, and then they are doing some kind of activities around the world on a regular basis, monthly basis you can say. And as I said earlier, Voice of Men, it is part of IMD. And currently we are working on a couple of things. One is recently created a Facebook group, Voice of Men 360. You can join. Live talk, we just started about a couple of, I would say, weeks. Probably we had about over six episode or 2 months over, yeah. Open up. Live talks, it's on Sundays from 10 to 10:30. The reason for the live talk is an individual can come and they can share their life experience, overcome challenges, any life situations. So whoever's listening from the other end, it's just giving a positive impact, making a positive changes in their lives. That's what the basic idea for Open Up Live Talks, because there's not many platforms to share, especially for men's, and then we don't have an open conversation. That's the reason behind it. And also it is in English, but also we have an in Tamil too, on weekdays, Wednesdays from 7:30 to 8 o'clock. So just 30 minutes. So there's no gender limitation, any age group or any people, any part of the world, they can come and join, they can share their life experiences. And also we have one more show on Saturdays from 8:30 to 9 o'clock. It is because for the time zoning for other countries, so they can, whoever cannot participate on those days, Sundays or Wednesdays, they can come and talk, join on Saturdays from 8:30 to 9 o'clock. All these times are Canadian times, EST. And let me bring Mr. Matthew here. I just want to briefly give introduction, and then this is the person I met probably last year, and then I'm glad I met because everything happening for a reason. That's what I believe always. Matthew D. Gardner is known as a subconscious releasing expert. He's the founder of Release Your Mind Now. His mission is to empower high performance with the tools or to facilitate greater levels of spiritual freedom, mental peace, and physical vitality. So I would like to welcome Matthew. Matthew, take it away from here. Thank you. Thank you a lot.
Thank you, Sivam. Yeah, it's great to be part of this community and helping our boys and men and having that 360-degree viewpoint on the evolution from boy to man and the importance of that. And it's just obviously near and dear to my heart being a man, but also growing up without a strong, healthy role model, growing up without a strong support system in the respect of what we're gathered here for. So it's my pleasure today to be interviewing Dr. James Brown. And Dr. Brown is very accomplished. He's the president of the Canadian Association for Equality. He spent more than 50 years working in education, during which he's held every job from being a classroom teacher all the way up to being the director of the Ontario government's Education Improvement Commission. He has 5 children, 9 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. And he's done presentations concerning what's happening with boys in school across Canada, across the UK, as well as in the United States. He's written or contributed to more than 30 books, and he's been interviewed by newspapers, magazines, and on radio and TV. So it's an absolute genuine pleasure to have you here, Jim. And please share with us, what is your message about boys in the school system?
Well, thank you very much, Matthew and Sivam. I appreciate it very much. I can't tell you how pleased I am to be here, because this is a marvelous opportunity for me. And I think what you're doing is terrific, and I'm glad to be part of it. The message in the lead up to this was the missing connection between boys and school, and you see, I'm going to turn that around, because I think the missing connection is the missing connection between school and boys. My dilemma with any of these is that children come the way they come, and we have to adjust. So the institutions have to adjust for the children, not the other way around. This time of year is famous for magazines in this country, at least. I can't speak for too many others, but certainly in Canada, the US, the UK. This time of year, you see magazines out, how to get your child ready for school. Well, see, that's backwards. It's how do we get our school ready for the children? When we start talking about having to change our children so they'll fit some pre-arranged school, we've lost sight of the fact. These are my children, they're your children. We get together and we spend money to build a school system, and what? Now we have to change our children to fit that school system? I can't imagine any other occupation. I can't imagine saying how to change my body so it'll fit better in the seat in my car. I would expect the car company to change the seat, not the other way around. But that's what we've done. That's what we're doing in our school system. And unfortunately, it's not new. It's been going on for ages. And I'm not new on this topic because it's important to me. So I'm going to talk about the missing connection between school and boys. And I'm going to tell you that it's a very important one. See, our education system should be helping all of our children to achieve in school to the level of their ability. So, you know, forget about all the other stuff. The fact of the matter is, what are your strengths? How do we build that? How do we adjust things to help you to achieve to the level that your ability allows? Unfortunately, in many ways, the school system doesn't do that. And it's not like it's brand new. I've been in this business for a long time, and this has been a constant theme for me. You see, for 40 years ago, I can talk about 40 years ago easily, children were doing reasonably well in school. And each year, a greater percentage of them went on to succeed in school and went on to secondary education and went on to colleges and universities. That was 40 years ago. And then in the 1980s, various interest groups in this country and in the US, and I can't speak for the whole world, but I can certainly talk about the ones I'm familiar with, declared the way to girls' crisis, and that girls were experiencing discrimination and inequality. And that was bought into very nicely by governments and so on. And remember, I was around working in those days. And so what we had happen was the education system has been making changes in the name of equality, based on the idea that the group that's not experiencing equality are girls in school. Well, equality was interpreted in terms of let's build equality, in helping girls to do better, and the education system was changed to reflect that philosophy. That's fine. Let's help children do better. I'm all for that. Now, here are some examples of the changes that were made. Over that time period, we virtually eliminated male teachers. So we've gone from a situation where over 30% of the teachers in elementary school in this country were men. We're now down to a situation where we have many schools that don't have any men, elementary schools, and we have, in terms of teacher training, they represent about 5%. So that's one change we made. We virtually eliminated male teachers. If anybody wants to talk about role models, well, we're in trouble there. We changed teaching methods. We changed teaching methods to, frankly, adjust our teaching methods to the methods that the teachers had been successful with. And the teachers are virtually all women. So the pitch is to how girls learn. We've had an increase in teacher bias. Not that it didn't exist before, but the problem is now the teacher bias is now reflecting a certain point of view, where before it perhaps represented both male and female point of view. Now it represents the female point of view, and I will talk more about this. We have a teacher attitude toward boys where I could go into a staff room in a school, and in the staff room, I would hear teachers say, I'm lucky this year because in my class, I only have 8 boys. And the next teacher would say, oh, you are lucky because I got 14 in mine. They didn't want boys in their classrooms. And you can say, what do I know? What do I know? Well, a year ago, just over a year ago, I was working in schools. So we have boys largely being viewed as defective girls. All children should learn the way girls learn. Well, they don't all learn the way girls learn. And I'm not, if you want to argue that I'm making this up, I'm not. The evidence is clear. School boards, in my time frame in administration, school boards were required to engage in blatant discrimination in hiring and promotions to favor women. And it was called affirmative action. So now we have a situation where we had, not that I'm saying it's good, but we had secondary schools that were staffed overwhelmingly by men. Men are now significantly in the minority in secondary schools as teachers and administrators, and becoming less and less. Now, as a director of education in Ontario, I sat on interviewing committees where if there were 30 applicants for a principal position, all the men applicants were removed from the pile, and the only people looked at were the women. And the only way we'd have looked at one of the men was if there wasn't anybody in the women's pile that was acceptable. I'm not making that up. I sat on the Ontario government's, the Ontario Minister of Education's qualification panels, and we were told if the candidate is a woman, she automatically passes. And if the candidate is a man, he only passes if you have exceptional reasons to indicate, because we want more women in these positions. Somebody wants to argue that I can name names. I'm not arguing that was a bad idea, but I'm arguing that once you reach parity or equality, that's the time to stop. But we didn't stop. We kept on doing that. And so we now have a situation where schools have been virtually totally feminized, and the school system has, and the result, schools are increasingly feminized, and girls are doing much better. I think that's terrific. Girls are doing much better. Unfortunately, boys are no longer showing the steady improvement of the past, and now are actually doing worse. In fact, the research shows that many boys are underachieving in school. That is, they're not achieving to the maximum of their potential. In fact, and that's a serious problem, because we've now created a societal problem that's the reverse of the one we claimed we had in 1980. Now, to complicate this further, I mean, it's bad enough that I'm talking about the school system this way, but to complicate this even further, the educational research, this is, if you don't remember anything from what I said, remember this one. The educational research indicates that the #1 predictor of long-term success in school is the level of literacy a child has before starting school. That's the #1 predictor. It's not the only predictor, but it's the #1 predictor. And so we can say the #1 predictor of university success is as your level of literacy at age 15, but the #1 predictor of your level of literacy at age 15 was the level of literacy when you were in grade 3, when you were, 8 or 9 years old. And the #1 predictor of that is as the level of literacy you had before you arrived at school. I'm not saying how well you read, just your general level of literacy. Okay, if that's the case, boy, we better be adjusting our schools. If we can't adjust the society, we better adjusting our school system to recognize that. All right, well. Today, partly due to societal pressures and partly due to what parents are doing, many boys are behind girls their age in terms of the literacy level when they arrive at school. Now, somebody can say, yeah, well, it's always been like that. No, it hasn't. See, I've been around for a long time. It's not like, okay, that's the way it was 15 years ago. It's not the way it was 50 years ago. It's not the way it was 40 years ago. So I said societal factors and parental practice. So what are some of the societal factors we're dealing with? Well, we have a lot of single parent families in this country, in the US and in the UK. I can't say that's true everywhere, but that makes a difference for children because we are talking about role models and so on. And the evidence is clear that kids have a handicap when they're dealing with that. I'm not saying, therefore, we have to change that. I'm just telling you that we have that. We've eliminated Boy Scouts. We now have Scouts. Well, one of the difficulties is you grow up in a family and unfortunately you don't have a male role model around. You go and join Scouts and it used to be, well, there were male leaders. Well, if it's a co-ed group, if it's male and female group, it has to have a female leader because you can't trust men after all. So it has to be a female leader. So where are the role models for these boys? Well, it used to be you'd get it, if you couldn't get it at home, you'd get it at Scouts, not anymore. So you could join boys clubs. You can't anymore because we don't have boys clubs anymore. We have boys and girls clubs. We have problems with our family courts. I'm not going to deal with that in length. We have serious problems with our family courts. If you follow advertising, you will see that over the years, advertising has shifted so that men are projected as absolute buffoons in the advertising in Canada, the US, the UK. If you look at books, there's evidence to indicate that the book publishers were told, and they told people read them. If someone is succeeding, you have to show a girl, and if someone is not succeeding, it'll fine if it's a boy. Even the cartoons that children watch have undergone this. So kids are constantly seeing this message. It's very hard on little boys, and very hard on little boys who need to have role models. Okay, so what are some of the parental practices? Well, we as parents, and parents will deny this up, down, and sideways, but we have the research to show it. Parents read to their daughters far more than they do to their sons. And so parents say, no, that's not true, that's not true. But when we do actual studies on it, we find it is true. And when parents are confronted with this, with the evidence, they say, oh, well, yeah, but my son doesn't like to sit and listen to me read. Well, you know what? Your son listens to you read even if he's playing with his truck. The point is, he doesn't go deaf. Just because he's not sitting the way your daughter is doesn't mean he's not listening anymore. Okay, so now we talk about what books will entertain boys. Well, I know from experience that when book companies produce books, publish books for small children, 90% of the books they publish are pitched to girls. Now, if you doubt that, phone the publishers, because they told me that themselves. So the question is why? Because parents buy 10 times as many books for the little girls as they do the little boys. They buy lots of sports equipment for the little boys, but they're not so keen on buying books because we think in terms of, well, you know, I'll go out and play basketball with my son or play soccer or football with my son, and I'll read with my daughter. Well, okay, so grandfather Jim here is in Florida, and he goes into a store and he's going to buy some gifts for his grandchildren. So they've got basketballs on sale. Well, I know my grandsons are interested in basketballs, so I buy some of those. But my granddaughters, I know, are not terribly interested in them, so I need to find something for them. I know. I'll buy them some books. So here I am over looking at the book rack, and all of a sudden, you know, flash, Jim, you wrote a book about this. That's what parents do. We don't do it to penalize our boys. We do it because we think that's what they're interested in. But when you find yourself in a situation, which I have done, where you talk to parents about buying books for their sons, and they tell you, but I can't find any that are printed for my sons. And I go then and I look in the store, and sure enough, in 3 countries, very, very few books written for little boys. Lots for little girls, but very few for little boys. So that's a message that we are subliminally sending to people. And it's not, this isn't out of meanness or nastiness. It's just the reality of what we deal with. Okay, so now we've got children arriving at school for whom they're not in love with books. Some are, some aren't. The ones who have had this experience of books are, the ones who haven't aren't. So in spite of its good intentions, I'm again not making this up, the school system is not very successful in helping these boys that haven't had this literacy advantage to close that literacy gap. They're really not very good at it. There are a lot of reasons why they're not, but they aren't. And schools, in fact, and been around the system a long time, they're far more likely to tell parents that their son has a learning disability or that he has ADHD than they are to use teaching methods that recognize that in general boys and girls learn differently, have different needs. Now, in my last number of years in experience in writing books and so on, I have had many occasions to talk to parents. Sometimes parents I've talked to as a group, but often I could be standing in a supermarket or in a Walmart store or whatever, and people read the stuff that's written on the back of my T-shirt, and so they talk to me, they ask me, and the parents tell me their sons are experiencing difficulty, and I say, well, you need to talk to the school, and they say, we talk to everybody, and all the school ever says to us is, your son has these problems. In other words, your son's defective. And guess what? I used to be the director of a school board. My own son, my youngest son, had to go for an IPRC. And that is a meeting of people to look at how we program for him. And I was there representing the school board, defending the school board's actions. And my son was represented by the superintendent who was there representing my family. And I might add, the things we came up with for that we needed to do for him, we never did. And I'm sorry to say that, but it was a reality. Okay, what about ADHD? I love to talk about this one because right now, 20% of the boys in the US secondary schools, 20%, have been diagnosed with ADHD. And one of the European countries decided that they needed to address this issue of ADHD. And so they ended up in a contract with Stanford University to come up with a way to deal with ADHD. So Stanford tried a number of things, and then they finally came up with a very easy one that reduced the number of boys or girls, boys and girls, identified with ADHD by 70%, over 70% actually. Got that? Over 70% reduction in the number of kids identified with ADHD. So what did they do? They had the kids start school a year later. The kids who were coming up with signs of ADHD because the program was too difficult for them. And I don't mean difficult like, oh, it's hard. I mean difficult like they weren't physically mature enough to do it. Mm-hmm. So the reality is we could eliminate 70%. We know we could eliminate more than 70% of the number of ADHD cases by changing the curriculum. But we don't change the curriculum, in spite of the fact we know it. And if I said this was done by, you know, a university I started in my backyard, you might argue the reality of it. But Stanford is not exactly a small-time university. And when you add to that, this is happening not just in this country, it's happening all over the world. So a result of this is that many boys struggle at school. I'm saying they all do, but many boys do. And they begin to develop learning disabilities that are psychological in nature, and they're caused by the education system. Now, I did a research study for the University of Toronto on this, and I've written about it. And in a school system in Ontario, we changed what the school system was doing, and we had 11% of the children in the system had what you might call garden variety learning disabilities. That is, they weren't generic or whatever. They were sort of garden variety difficulty. So we changed how that school system was operating in the primary grades, and they went from 11% to 0. They went to 0. We solved the problem. Well, the senior administration of that school either retired or went on to other jobs and so on. And the new people who came in put the school system back the way it had been. And they went back to 11% disabilities. And everybody was happy. Well, not everybody was happy. The parents of those 11% of the kids weren't happy, but the system was happy, and everything was back the way it's supposed to be. And if you doubt that, you'll see all the evidence of it.
Can we talk about that?
One of my books. Sorry.
We talk about that point right there, Jim?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because that's really fascinating, because you clearly solved a problem.
Yeah.
Were there people that were made unhappy when you solved that problem?
Yes.
So that's the reason for changing it back.
Well, not entirely. Part of the problem is the school system got a new director, a newly appointed director, who came from one of the big school boards in the system, in the province, and whose view of how a school system should operate came from that type of thinking. So this person hadn't been part of the research, hadn't been part of the pursuing it. And from the teacher's point of view, there was less work involved in doing what they had been doing than there was in doing what we were proposing. I might add, teachers weren't, the teacher training institutes didn't adopt this. This was adopted at school system level. The union didn't like it. I mean, we can go down the list of people who didn't like it, but the fact of the matter is, once we put it back, once they put it back the way it was, they went back to having a standard number of problems which they thought were fine. Right. Well, I don't think it's fine at all. And if it was my child, I wouldn't be happy. Okay, let me tell you a story now that I'm on a roll here. Here I am sitting in the UK, and I read an article in the newspaper that says parents can relax and be happy and so on because 80% of children are doing just fine at school. So as a parent, you can have your glass of wine, sit back and relax because your child's doing fine. So I read the article and I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. So I write an objection, and my objection is, if you're a parent of one of the 20%, I can understand you sitting in your chair drinking wine, but it might not be just a glass. So the reality is, if they're saying it's just fine because 80% of the kids are succeeding at school, if I go to the airplane company that's going to fly me back to Canada, and they tell me, no problem, Jim boy, no problem. 80% of our flights make it. I don't think I'd fly with them. So the point is, but 80% of our kids are doing fine at school. Well, fine, but if I'm a parent of one of that 20%, well, never mind that. I object, period, because it's just simply not right. It's not acceptable. And it's not boys that have to get ready for school. It's school that has to get ready for boys, and school has to get ready for girls. And all the children that you're dealing with, the system has to be prepared to adapt, to modify, to meet those kids' needs, and to see that they succeed and achieve to the extent of their ability. Now, they don't all have the same ability. I accept that. But the fact of the matter is, you can't simply write them off because, oh, well, 20% is okay. It's not okay. Absolutely not okay. And if we were doing it, and if you go out and buy a car and they tell you, well, that's okay, 80% of our cars make it off the parking lot. Well, that's not good enough. I'm sorry. It's certainly not good enough when dealing with my children.
So Jim, I got a question here. So yeah. It seems that there's evidence that there are solutions here that obviously require adaptation, evolution, changing mindset predominantly. What's the reason? Like, if we have the cure, so why is it not being implemented?
Well, problem number one is getting people to accept the fact that it is a problem. Right. And increasingly, we have people who want to say, the problem is your child. And when I deal with a parent of an autistic child, and the parent says, or the school tells the parent, well, your child has difficulties and so on, and then tells the parent, you're not a very good parent, and that's happened, I'm thinking, wait a second now, how did we deflect this onto it's someone else's problem? I'm sorry, but the fact of the matter is, children come the way they come. They don't come the way you want them to come. And if you're parents, any of you are parents, they don't all arrive custom made. They arrive the way they arrive. Well, you know what? They arrive at school that way. I listened to an educator years ago say, it was absolutely fascinating. He said, when we get to August, the school system started in September. He's from the US. He said, I should be allowed to go down to the office and go through the files of the children. And I would say, well, I'll take this one, and I'll take that one, and I'll take this one. Oh, I don't want that one or that one or that one, and I'll take this one. I'm sorry, that's not how it works. You get what you get, the same as you as a parent get what you get. So the reality is, as a parent, you accept the fact that you've got to make adjustments. And if the child's difficulties are sight or physical or missing a limb or something, you have to learn to deal with that, and you deal with it. Well, how does a school system or a teacher get away with saying, well, it shouldn't be in my class, or it's okay if 20% of the kids aren't doing well? It's not okay. It's absolutely unequivocally not okay. So here are some changes you can make. Well, let me tell you one of the things we're dealing with. In Ontario, the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation hired a researcher, a noted professor at Queen's University. So I'm not talking second rate here. They hired this person to look at different things could be done to help children achieve. Well, what did this man find out? He found out that if they took student papers and put a boy's name on the paper, it got a lower grade than if they put a girl's name on the paper. And it didn't happen once, it happened consistently. Now, we've had that information for years. Why haven't we adjusted anything? And why haven't we accepted the fact that as we have more and more women teachers, and I'm not saying the women teachers did it on purpose, the men teachers did the same thing. They gave the girls higher grades. So the fact of the matter is, we have this built-in bias, and I don't hear anybody talking about it. And yet that information's been around for years, and it came from the Secondary School Teachers Federation. I mean, it's not like, and it came from Queen's University. It's not like you've never heard of it. Okay, so Columbia University in New York State. Columbia University has been the university for education of educators forever. Okay, so Columbia did a study, and in the study they went to kindergarten children. They did thousands of kindergarten children, and they tested those children for literacy, math ability like numeracy, and science. And they evaluated them using test instruments. Okay, and we're not talking about, again, we're not talking about a second-rate organization. We're talking about one of the best teacher education facilities in the world. Okay, they did it. They didn't tell the teachers what they came up with. They then interviewed the teachers and said, could you tell us how these children did? Okay, when they did the test, the boys scored slightly lower than the girls did in literacy. Generally, they scored slightly lower. Okay. In math, boys scored higher. And in science, they scored significantly higher. They asked the teachers. The teachers said the boys were significantly lower in literacy. The boys were lower in math and lower in science. All three, the boys were lower than the girls. Okay, unless the boy had typical girl or feminine characteristics. In that case, that boy was evaluated the same as the girls. Now, you can say somebody's making this up. Not at all. This is done by a top university. And that's not hidden information. So that was replicated in the United Kingdom. They replicated the study in Northern Ireland. And they got the same results. So why haven't we changed anything? Because the system doesn't want things to change. It undoes everything that you come up with because it doesn't want it to change. Everybody's happy with it. I'm sorry. Employees are happy with it the way it is. Administrators are happy with the way it is. Okay, I wrote a number of books and I was interviewed by Sun Media. And the newspapers up in my area interviewed me, and I said, boys aren't doing as well as girls are doing. That's all I said. I didn't go into reasons or anything. I said, boys aren't doing as well as girls are in we have a problem with how boys are doing in school. So the reporter wrote the story, and she contacted the various school boards, up the Catholic board, the secondary board, and so on, and had all kinds of difficulty getting anybody to talk to her. But finally, they talked to her, and they said, both boards said the same thing. No, we meet all kids' needs, and boys are not doing badly, and so no. So she wrote an article, and she printed the EQAO results. That's the testing they do in grade 3 on math and English. And those were printed showing the difference how boys and girls were doing. And it was significant. And it was that school board that she presented results from. So the people they'd interviewed, the administrators, had said, we don't have a problem, but there was the evidence that they did. So the school board took action. I'll give them credit. They took action. They banned me from going to any of their schools. Think that one over. It was my fault because I was interviewed. Anyway, that appeared in all the Sun media newspapers in the whole area. I was interviewed on television, you name it. So I get banned because I said, we have a problem. I didn't blame anybody. I just simply said, boys aren't doing as well as girls. All I said. It was their own administrators who said, no, we don't have the problem. Okay. A year or two later, I've forgotten now, might have been a year later, I wrote another book. And I was interviewed, and it was another book talking about the same kinds of issues. The different reporter contacted the school boards and got the same answers as the previous one had a year ago, and printed the results. And who was the villain? I was the villain. Like I had done something bad. I have those incidents. I have those newspaper articles. It's not like I have them. Actually, I have them. I look at them periodically when I want to get annoyed. So, Matthew asked me a good question. The good question is, why don't we do something about it? We don't want to do anything about it because we don't want to admit that what we're doing, and as a former director, we don't want to admit that what we're doing isn't meeting the needs of kids. We're busy trying to tell people there isn't a problem when there is one, and it's clear there is one. And it's not clear because someone thinks so. Mm-hmm. We have the actual results. We have them, mm-hmm. Province-wide. I might add, probably Canada.
What do you think the reason is for this ongoing denial? Like, it's clearly that there's evidence. Why the denial?
Well, okay, so I have said one of the difficulties is our hiring practices in our schools and our affirmative action and so on. Do you see people lined up saying they want that changed? You might see it in terms of some of the groups you belong to, but generally speaking, you don't read that in the newspaper. Schools starting again this week, and all the discussion is about what are we doing about the virus. No discussion whatever about what's happening to boys. None. Mm-hmm. And yet it's a major problem, and I'm going to show you on this. So anyway, boys become disengaged by school. So now the school is there, the boys there, and they become disengaged. And the last number of years, I've worked in schools, and in elementary schools, and I've worked with boys who had already given up on the school system. Mm-hmm. Those are the kids I worked with, kids who, now, what was I told? I was told by administration, and I was told by school folks. You know, these boys have lost interest and so on. It's like it's their problem. So I started a music club. I play musical instruments. So I created a school band for boys that had written school off. So the boys joined the band, and suddenly they were succeeding, and they were doing very well, and they were well regarded in the school, and they did better, quite a bit better at school. So we can make a difference. We just have to want to make a difference. We can't just write them off. Well, anyway, I did that up until last year, and as I said, last year I had a medical issue that sort of has changed things for me. But anyway, boys are becoming disengaged. So I talk to them and say, well, talk to administration, and they tell me, well, no boys quit elementary school. None of them quit. Of course they don't. They're legally required to be there. But they are now locationally present. They're physically present, but they've emotionally and mentally given up. They've stopped. And I've talked to a number of women school board administrators who told me that their sons as young as 5 years of age have already come home and said, I don't want to go to school anymore. And they said, why? Well, because school's for girls.
Wow.
The whole staff are women, and any awards that the school gives, any that they give, are given to the girls. Schools are for girls. The boys have already figured. I mean, so there's a school board administrator telling me that her son has already written off school and he's 5 years of age. Now, how are you going to get that kid back? What are you going to do to recreate it?
How do we raise awareness about this, Jim?
Well, I will get to it. I haven't.
Oh, sure.
I'll pick up some speed here. Well, we know we can reduce the number of children, boys and girls, with diagnosed with learning disability. We know because we've done it. We know we can deal with the ADHD question. We know it. We've done it. It's worked. It's not okay. When I start talking about Columbia University and the University of Toronto and Queen's University, and we go down the list, Simon Fraser, when I start talking about the work any of these have done, and they've made a difference, a significant difference, why aren't we doing it? What's wrong with us? When I talk to the professors who were teaching students student teachers at U of T, and I said, you know, you have to remember that every classroom that you work in is a one-room schoolhouse. It may say grade 3 on the door or whatever, grade 10 or whatever you like. But the fact is the kids are way spread out beyond that. That means nothing. And they all agree with me, and nothing changes. They don't change a thing. Well, I'll tell you, we did a study and looking at kids with learning disabilities, and what did we discover? We discovered that if your birthday falls in the last 2 months of the year, you are 4 times as likely to be diagnosed with the learning disability than if your birthday falls in the first 2 months of the school year. Now I didn't make that up, that's real. So they replicated that study incidentally, I was the author of that study, and they replicated that study in England, only they looked at, interestingly enough, because one of the things we'd looked at was hockey, but anyway, they looked at soccer. And sure enough, if your birthday falls at the end of the year where they put little children into soccer, you do better than if your birthday is the beginning. And so what did we find out? We found out that if you look at the birth dates of players in the NHL, most of them have birthdays in the second half of the year, by far, most of them. If you look at the OHL, you'll find the same thing. And if you look at Pee Wee hockey, all-stars, you'll find the same thing. And so it's okay if we do this to our kids at school. That's terrible but it's terrible if we do it to our kids playing hockey. There's something wrong with this, folks. So why do we have that? We have that because we created a system where we say if you're in grade 10, everybody does the same thing. Well, they're not all at the same point. They have different interests. Anyway, we know we can reduce it, but educators have shown they've extreme, although it's unconscious. I'm not saying that on purpose. There's a major gender bias. So one of the examples for me was I went over to visit. I was superintendent. I went over to visit a school that was doing some work on changing the culture and so on. And I walked across the schoolyard at recess time, and there were teachers on supervision. You wouldn't see that now, but there were then. And so there was a woman teacher that I said hello to, and I walked past, and a male teacher facing me, and I said hello to him, and all of a sudden, and some little boys ran past me. And I heard the woman teacher yell at them. And I turned around and looked. And by the time I turned around and looked, they were standing facing the fence, up against the fence. They were frozen there. They weren't to move. So I said to the male teacher, because he had seen what was going on, I didn't, on behind me. I said, what happened that they got, how'd they get in trouble? What happened? And he said, I didn't see anything that wasn't normal as far as I was concerned. And the point was, it was normal as far as he was concerned, but it wasn't normal in terms of this woman teacher thinking like a girl. Well, okay, I've got sons and daughters. I know what it's like to be a boy. Brain-wise, I know what it's like to be a girl. But in here, I don't know what it's like to be a girl. And it's not because I don't want to. I just don't have that experience. I don't know what it's like to be a drug addict. I don't know what it's like to be an alcoholic. I don't know any of those things. I know my head does, and I have qualifications in those areas. But that's only head stuff. I don't know inside here. I don't know. And that's what's happening to us in school. So what do we have? We have children arrive in school, and by and large, if you put a group of girls and a group of boys and you give them a task to solve, the girls will sit and they will talk about it, and they will sort of map out a plan of how they're going to talk about it and attack it and so on. You put that group of boys together. Now, that doesn't happen every time, but it happens most of the time. They will say, well, it probably is this, and they will attempt to solve the problem that way. If it solves it, fine. If it doesn't solve it, they'll say, okay, that didn't work. Okay, what's next most likely to do? And they'll do that. They'll do it. Meanwhile, the girls are still talking about it. That's how we raise our children. We raise our boys, get out and do and so on, and we raise our girls to think about and so on. All right, well, if you operate a school system and everything you do is based on how the girls learn, your boys are soon turned off, and that's part of this gender bias, but it's not intentional, but it's there. And the percentage of male teachers has declined, I mean, dramatically, and it has a major consequence for male students, and not because people are deliberately hurting boys or anything else. I'm not talking about that. It's just that we don't all have the same learning experiences. Now, we have research, and I talked about it, that shows that the grades we give kids are based on gender rather than performance. Yeah. I'm not making that up. I gave you 2 major studies, and more than 2. Now, parents' expectations of their children are very often shaped by what the school tells them. So if the school tells you your daughter is doing better than one would expect for a child her age, your expectations are affected by that. And if they tell you your son isn't doing as well as might be expected, your parental expectation is shaped by that as well. Now, we have research on that, tons of it, and it goes back a long, long time. So inadvertently, we are creating a situation where we are disadvantaging our boys. Anyway, and I better skip through a lot of stuff here, and because I don't want to run out of time. Not for a minute or 2. I don't anyway. So what can we do? Well, parents can help boys become achievers in school. They can. So there's small changes you can make that make a big difference. So, for example, as a parent, if we know that learning is holistic in nature, and it is, then it's important that we speak to our children and not face to face so they can see your lips moving. Because in fact, babies begin to learn to process literacy by not only hearing, but by seeing the adult's face and so on. Most of us wouldn't have known that, but it's true, and it's part of how we as parents need to operate. We need to speak with our children, not just to them. So we have to do that. And unfortunately, we do a lot more of it with girls than boys. We need to read to and with our children, including boys, and we need to listen to them read. And we need to have books that they're likely to be interested in. So it's not good enough to simply give everybody My Little Pony books. I'm sorry, it just isn't good enough. And we need to engage in physical contact with our children. So my wife would sit with the children and read with the children up against her. And the child makes the connection between feeling good about it being engaged with mom or dad and reading a book. And sure enough, I could walk into the living room and one of my children would be sitting there in the chair, in the reading chair, reading a book and getting that same good feeling that that child got from the parent. Now, there's research on that. It's not brand new, but there's a lot of research on it. So the fact of the matter is, when those children arrive at school, the child who has had that engagement with the parent and the book and transferred the engagement with the parent to an engagement with the book, arrives at school, sees tons of books, and feels a great engagement with school. The child who hasn't had that arrives at school and doesn't have that engagement. So that's something parents need to know. They need to know that. It's not maybe, it's a reality. And so that's something, parents need to see us engaged in reading, and that's particularly important for dads or for male figures, because if you want a little boy to identify reading as something us guys do, they need to see us guys doing it. And if they don't see us guys doing it, and they only see women doing it, they end up in school saying, I don't want to go to school because it's for girls. Okay, there's educational research that shows what makes the difference. And as chance would have it, I've written a whole number of books. And they're books based on the idea that they have a male as the central character. They're books that boys actually own, even though they can't necessarily read them. And that's based on the idea that if you think about it, children play with the new toy they get, and they very often take that new toy to bed. It's mine. I can't read this book. Suzanne, would you read this book to me, please? So you read the book to me, but the book is mine. And I develop a love and a positive relationship with that book and with reading. And that makes a difference. Okay, so we need to be looking at that. And we need problem solving and characteristics and so on. Okay, so here I've got, I'm telling you this for a reason, because I have produced a whole raft of books for boys. Why did I produce them? I produced them because people couldn't buy them, couldn't buy books. They didn't exist. So I produced a whole raft of books, which incidentally, I'm quite willing to give away. And if you're interested, if you get in touch with Sivam, I will send him as many as he wants. And you can give them away. Okay, I mean, I paid for them. I'll give them away because it makes a difference in children's lives. It makes a phenomenal difference in their lives. So that's one thing, and I'm quite willing to give the stuff away. It's absolutely not an issue for me. I just want them to succeed. So what can families do to help your kids already in school? Well, okay, here are 3 things that parents can actually do. Incidentally, you notice I'm not saying we're going to change the whole school system because I don't have a lot of faith in that. I've had every job that goes in education, including director of the School Improvement Commission, and I'm still waiting for the schools to improve. Okay, one thing we need to do is have daily conversations with our children about events at school. And I can tell you, if you ask your child, what did you learn at school today? Your child is going to say nothing. But you have to pursue that. And the child has to accept the fact that they're going to be asked every day. So the child begins to evaluate these things and learn from them. And if you doubt the facility of that, Simon Fraser University did a study using that particular item that I just mentioned about talking about what you've learned in school today. And the children, on average, had a 30% improvement in their scores at school. 30%. And it just came from parents talking to the child and insisting that the child talk about what they learned. When I worked in the UK, I worked with kids who were totally disinterested and so on, but we did that every day, and we made a big difference in how the children performed. So that's one. We need to set and clarify expectations, and we have to model the desired behavior. There's no point in saying to my child, you should read, if I don't read, because the fact of the matter is, if I don't read, then why would my child think that's something that us guys do? So we have to do that. And we need to share our personal knowledge about our children with the teachers at the beginning of the year. Not, okay, it's nearly Christmas, so let's have a parent-teacher conference. No, let's have the conference before school starts, because there's things you need to know about my children. And you are the expert in education, and I am the expert on my child. So let's work together. So we need to have that early. Let's have conferences where we're equals, not interviews. I never did parent-teacher interviews. It's a conference. We need to talk about how we can combine what the parent knows about the child and what I know about education to help this child. We need to have the same high expectations for our sons as our daughters, in spite of what the school may tell us about how our sons or daughters are doing. We have to have these, and we have to convey these to our child. I've got high expectations for you. I expect you to do well, and I know you're going to do well because you've got all kinds of ability. We have to insist that the schools start to take some steps to balancing the male-female ratio in academic staffing, because we know, we've got the evidence. We've got tons of evidence that shows us that it's a major factor. And I don't care if people don't like me saying this. Too bad if they don't like it. We've got tons of evidence to show it's the case. So let's deal with it. We need to have awards for both boys and girls. I go to a school and I'm to give out an award. Go to the school, give out an award. The school's got 11 awards for giving out. 10 of the 11 are going to girls. The one that's going to a boy is best male athlete. That's it. 10 going to girls, 1 going to boys. And nobody sees a problem. I don't have teachers saying we've got to start working on this so that we get better equity and equality. No, that's the way it is. No, I'm sorry. It's not good enough to simply say that's the way it is. We need to be to have, so we might have to have an award that says most improved boy, most improved girl. It doesn't have to be competitive against each other, boys and girls, but we need to be recognizing that boys do it. We didn't change that culture. So I don't think, so the question is, are boys the problem? Obviously, I don't think so. Parents can help their sons if they know about this. So spread the word, and don't hesitate to invite me to speak to any group you want. Any group, I do it free. It's not a problem. I'm happy to do it. I'll travel, whatever. But I'm happy to spread the word. Read my books. I have written 20 books for boys that are written for small children. You know, get some of the books. I'll give them to any number of CBAM wants he can have, and we give them out and give them to schools and give them to school libraries and give them wherever. And of course, I'm going to come back to, don't forget to read my book, Rescuing Our Underachieving Sons, which you can buy from any online bookstore. But it is you can buy that right now for $5.99 from Amazon in ebook form, and probably starting next month, it'll be about a month, that book will be selling for 99 cents in ebook form. So I'm promoting it because it's there are like 500 sources in it, and it's not, I think, it's all based on this is what the research shows. So I'm busy promoting that because I'm saying, look, folks, and incidentally, Sibam, if you want a stack of them, I'll give you a stack of them that you can give away. No problem at all. You give them away. I just want to put them in people's hands because I believe so strongly in what this is about. Okay.
Yeah. So
Any more questions?
yeah, I want to jump in just to
Yeah.
kind of give like next action steps is obviously for people to educate themselves on this problem.
Yeah.
It sounds like it starts at home though. We can't rely on the government or the school system to change because there's just not enough of a voice for it yet.
Right.
And it sounds like it's probably going to start with that 20% of parents of children who are having the challenges. So,
And almost all of that 20% are boys.
exactly.
You might be happy to hear that, or unhappy, one or the other, but it's almost all boys.
Yeah, so it's really about reaching those 20% first. That's where the change will start. Would that be a fair thing to say?
It is for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And parents have to accept the fact that you're not going to single-handedly change society or the school system or whatever. And I can say that because I go back to what I'm saying. I've had every job going, including director with the Education Improvement Commission in Ontario, and I didn't change it. It wasn't like I didn't try.
It's really changed one child at a time, and that starts at home. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. That's it's very encouraging, Jim. I mean, to shed light on it, obviously we have to identify that there's a problem. And you do that in a very elegant and very clear way. And it's not coming from a place of people are doing things wrong. People just don't know what they don't know, and they need to be made aware.
Exactly.
And I think you're presenting it in a really loving and kind way in that respect. And I think that's the best way to approach something like this, because if we approach people like you're wrong for doing things the way you are, that people clam up. They're never going to listen. But I really appreciate how you're approaching it from that space of open-mindedness and open-heartedness. And I think that's really the beginning of transformation in any endeavor.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Jim, I have a question though.
Sure.
There was a doctor, he wrote a book on kids' mind. Basically, it's in Tamil language, in our mother tongue, native language. But he was on my show last week, last Saturday. And then he was talking about all the medical side of it, about boys, kids and boys. But one other thing I noticed, and then I just want to ask you that, is it because of the learning? I mean, the brain is developing late in the years, like let's say 5 or after 5 or 8 years. I wouldn't say 8, but late when it comes to boys, rather than, I mean, compared to girls brain developing earlier. Is it one of the reasons you think because they perform lower or poorly on the education side, the school system?
That's you're right. That's one of the factors. But the reality is, I had a group of I had a group with junior kindergarten and senior kindergarten children in the same class, all in the same room, and the teacher gave them a task to do, and so those children they covered 2 years. Well, the children were like writing a story. So some of the children did some pictures. Some of the children did lines, lines across the page. Some of the children wrote some words. Anyway, you could see the development was going on. Okay, well, the point was you couldn't say here are the junior kindergarten children and here are the senior kindergarten children, because that wasn't the case. They were spread across that, and they were also spread across boys and girls. So yes, we have to accept that there's a difference in terms of how fast any of us mature. We have to accept that, and reasonable to say, yes, that there will be a difference in boys and girls. But that doesn't mean they can't learn. And it doesn't mean that all boys are in this category and all girls in that category, because that's not true. So you have to accept the fact, I'm going back to me saying, every class is a one-room schoolhouse. And I did teach in my teacher training days, I'll grant you, it was a long time ago, but I did teach in a one-room schoolhouse. There were 28 children. I remember it well, in 8 grades. And I had them all day. So the fact of the matter is, whether I call them all grade 4, or whether I call them all grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, the fact of the matter is, they were all over the map. Mm-hmm. And so when I taught elementary school, I taught secondary school, I taught university, you name it. But when I taught, I had to accept the fact that children were all over the map. And it's even more so when you get to university people, the expansion is even greater. And so the fact of the matter is, you can't say everybody has to do the same thing. You accept the fact that people will function where they are, and you need to adjust what you're doing to that. So yes, rate of development is a factor, and yes, the boys' rate of development may be slower than some girls, but the fact of the matter is, for a lot of boys, it's faster. So it's not just as simple as saying, here's the answer to the solution. It's not. That's not the solution. The solution is we've got to deal with these individual children we have, and how do we move from there? But when we do a study of thousands of children, not a few, but thousands of children of kindergarten age, and the teachers consistently say the girls are functioning much higher than the boys, even when we have evidence that doesn't show that, what are they missing? And when you add to that the fact that if the boy behaves like a girl, he's rated higher. Now you're dealing with people's perceptions and people's biases. And I don't mean that nasty. I don't mean that in terms of, this isn't, we're all bad people. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying we see what we see partly based on what our beliefs are. Seeing is believing, but believing is seeing. Believing is seeing.
Sorry, Jim. So yeah. There's another question related to that same topic. Yeah. Do you agree, or do you see that, did his school system, not the school system, but the teachers or whoever in the education sector in the field, let's say the medical field, of course, the professional, they understood or they know the difference and then function and everything. But the teacher, do they understand? Did they understand? Have you seen or have you come across anything? How do you look at that?
Well, see, part of our dilemma is if you want to become a medical doctor, you have, I can't speak for the whole world, but in this country, if you want to become a medical doctor, you have to do pre-doctoral courses in your undergraduate degree. You don't get into graduate school until you've done these pre-grad. Okay, so you learn all kinds of things, and then you go to medical school and you learn and so on. All right, now compare that to what we've done with teachers. The majority of teachers have 1 year of teacher training, and it isn't even a full year; it's a short year. And all of the education that they've had prior to that, I mean, they could have a BA in anthropology. They don't have any training in stages of development, rates of development. They don't have any training in that. None in psychology and so on. They might have, but they don't have to have, and most of them don't. Okay, so what do? We say we're going to have a 2-year teacher training program. So we have 2 years of the same thing. We're still not dealing with those other issues. You want to improve education? Create a pre-education degree that people have to take the way we do in medicine. I mean, I have trouble believing that I'm going to deal with a pharmacist whose background is in, you know, in the typing. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you have to take these in order, you know, because it's not something you learn just in 8 months. And as long as we operate our school system on that basis, when we switched, we did, you know, years ago, didn't require people to necessarily have degrees. Well, the fact of the matter is, when we told them they had degrees, we didn't tell them what kind of courses they needed to take. So if somebody's got a degree, as I say, in anthropology or genetics or whatever, that has got nothing to do with learning to deal with children. Learning. So now you can say, well, what have I learned about these things? Well, what have I learned? Hey, I've spent a whole lifetime going to school because I didn't know the things I needed to know to do a proper job with the children that were entrusted to me. Now, I'm sorry. I mean, if that sounds like it's my inadequacy. It was me saying, I just don't know enough. My responsibility with these children is phenomenal, and I just don't know enough. So I've got to learn some more. I've got to continue to study, and I studied part-time virtually my whole life. Why? I mean, it wasn't like there was some kind of reward in it. The bottom line was, if I want to be able to help these children, I need to know this. But that's not the message we give. We give the message saying, I've got my education. Well, no, I don't. I'm just still in the process of learning. If I'm going to be any good at this. And I'm happy. I'm so happy to be on this program. And talking to you, talking to Matthew, talking to people that I haven't talked to before. It's great. And, you know, terrific.
Thanks a lot,
Jim. I helped you at all, but you helped me.
Yeah. Matthew, go ahead. I will finish it off.
Excellent. Yeah, well, thank you, Jim. Again, you know, I think if there is going to be change taking place, which is inevitable, change is the one thing we can count on over time, albeit it's not always up to us in terms of the timing. In my experience, there's a natural timeline of things evolving. But if that's going to happen in a progressive way and a permanent way, again, I think it comes down to coming from it from a place of kindness, a place of understanding, a place of not blaming, a place of not feeling like a victim, and also an understanding that collectively we've all created this together, this circumstance. And so to be a leader and to really take 100% responsibility for the circumstance that we are in, we can pool with those that are like-minded and really start this initiative. And you've brought me greater awareness to it, Jim. I'm planning on beginning a family at some point in the next 2 to 5 years. And boys or girls, I think it's essential to have this knowledge and to know how to address things appropriately in our educational system. So it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you, and I look forward to continued learning in this field.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, both of you. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Matthew and Jim. I just want to add one comment. I'm not sure whether it's right or wrong, but I just thought, you know, when we say the missing connection in the school system between our boys and the school system, I believe from my understanding from hearing Dr. James, is also, it's not, when we say school system, it's part of the teachers' education too, because they need to understand the psychology part of that too, because otherwise it's very hard, because I believe most of the time they are in the school, only few hours at home. So they are second parents, so they are spending a lot of times. So I don't mean anything on the negative side about teachers, but I just feel something, you know, that is the whole system is also needs to be done done something like that. Anyway, thanks a lot again, once again. And this monthly webinar, this is our first monthly webinar for Voice of Men 360. And this is actually supported by a very good friend of mine, Debt Credit Solution. His name is Ilankiran, and the phone number is actually 416-834-7227. So if you have any debt problems or any issues, he can solve it. He's a very good guy. He's doing for more than 7, 8, 10 years nearly. So again, his name is Ilankiran, 416-834-7227. And I just want to close with these couple of things right now. Voice of Men has a live talk on Sundays in English from 10 to 10:30. Any individual can come and share their life stories or life experience. So by sharing, when you share your life experience, any situations, any overcomes, any life challenges, the other people or other individual can relate to your situation, and they can change their mindset or thinking pattern, or somehow they can change their lifestyle. And also it is available in Tamil too, from on Wednesdays from 7:30 to 8 o'clock. So it's 30 minutes, but even if I say 30 minutes, people, whenever they say they go with their life journey, some challenges, they're telling their stories, I don't really cut off in the middle of the conversation. So it's a little bit longer. And we have a monthly we have a monthly webinar twice a month. We bring an expert, and then we talk about men's or boys' issues, not only men's side, but also in the common, social issues too. So it will help our boys and men's too. Anything else? Also, this is part of IMD, which is International Men's Day. So there's another live talk show on Saturdays from 8:30 to 9 o'clock. It is also all the live talks on Canadian time. Once more, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate Matthew and Jim for your time. And then, I will bring in the near future both of you guys, for other segment, and then we will discuss another topic. All right. Thanks a lot. Whoever has any questions or anything, just you can send us an email or send us a you can send us a message on Facebook too, Voice of Men 360. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.